Okay, good evening. I had about 20 seconds on it before I even noticed it was running. Sorry about that. Excuse me. Good way to start. This is Simchat Yeshua Messianic Fellowship, and we are in our Galatians study on Wednesday evening at 6 o'clock California time. And just got started on the broadcast, the channel. So I'm going to vamp here for a minute or two, give people a chance to get in and settle down. And in the meantime, let's see, let me explain. Simchat Yeshua Messianic Fellowship is a Messianic Jewish congregation in West Covina, California. And you can reach us on our website at simchatyeshua.org. And that's spelled SIMCHATYESHUA.org. Or on our Facebook page, Simchat Yeshua. And let me see, all the YouTube announcements. Be sure to like, subscribe, share, and ring the bell so you can be apprised of when we go live here on Wednesdays, 6 o'clock California time. So that's basically it. Oh, one other thing. Since this is not Shabbat, I can say this. If you're interested in supporting the congregation or this channel, you can help out through the website. There's a link in the website where you can give something if you want to. Okay. Enough of that. Let me also do a couple of basic announcements. Let me move this page over to where's the other window here? This is Galatians chapter 6. All right. Let me explain a little bit about Galatians chapter 6, or Galatians in general, then we can get into our study. Galatians was a very difficult book to understand and to teach because it's been so severely misrepresented and thus mistaught. Most important differences I'll mention just quickly right now is that Shaul, that's his Hebrew name, Paul in English, as functioning as an apostle of Messiah, could not have possibly ever stated that it was wrong to keep the commandments of God. Yet that's how his letter to the Galatian congregations has been interpreted historically. So we need to look at what's going on. And of course, beginning of chapter 6 here this week, we're going to be winding down our study in Galatians. You can always go back and check all the other posts to rerun the lessons to get this in more detail. But let me give you just a quick touch on what's going on here. Historically, Paul was writing a circular letter to the congregations in the Galatian region, and basically warning against Pharisaism, not God's commandments, but Pharisaism. We see the same idea happening in Acts chapter 15, where the big issue was at first some people came along and said, oh, you have to be Pharisees in order to get saved. That's in Acts 15. That idea was put down. Then they came back later and says, okay, they don't have to become Pharisees to get saved, but they all have to become, all the Gentiles who are believers have to become Pharisees. And that's where the big discussion was about. And the bottom line was that they don't need to become Pharisees. Gentiles don't need to become Pharisees to be part of the congregation of God. But they do have to clean up the worst items of the pagan worship practices of that day. And then in verse 21, you have this curious statement that nobody likes to talk about, which is, for Moses is taught in every Sabbath day in every synagogue. Okay, I don't quote that. I never quote that right, but you know what I mean. You can go back and look for the exact quote, but that's the meaning of it. It's a hole in my brain in verse 21 there. Just I can never get it out the right way. The idea is Gentiles are to be permitted into the Messianic congregations, whereby they can learn to live God's holy lifestyle through keeping his commandments. Notice that salvation was not required. Obedience to God's commandments was not necessary for salvation's sake, but it is necessary for an everyday walk of holiness before a holy God. And so the idea was Gentiles can be Gentiles in the congregation of God, but they do need to learn God's ways. And that's how we treat things, and that's how we teach things in our congregation. You can come to our congregation as a Gentile and say, hey, I know nothing about this stuff. I'm not even sure if I even like half the ideas that are going on, but I want to learn. So, okay, come and learn. Come and learn. By the time they get to us, a lot of people have already decided they want to keep a messianic lifestyle, including obeying God's commandments. So the discussion or the pushback of thinking, well, I don't really need to do this stuff has pretty much already been done by God by the time most people get here. Most of the time, the issue is, how do I do all this? And it may seem like a daunting, insurmountable task to learn all of God's ways, especially if you're an adult and set in your ways. But it is doable, and most all of us have, as adults, learned to pick up the messianic lifestyle, a lifestyle of obedience to God's commandments, learning to love God's ways and to follow his ways. So it's doable. So, item number 1, Galatians is not about getting rid of God's commandments, but rather we don't need to be Pharisees to be part of the family of God. Item number 2, which hinges right off of that, Paul talks about the law. I used to say 2 different ways in his letter to Galatians. I ran into one in last chapter, a different version of the use of the word law, and also in this reading for today, we're going to find still a 4th reason. So much for my being so highly prepared for this. It's kind of like the weekly reading sections. We read the same sections every year, and yet you always find something new. And so going through Galatians this time around, I've discovered that my count of 2 of what were 4 items 4 different ways that Paul used the word law in his writings turns out to be 3 of 5 ways he uses it in his writing. So I've had to learn a little bit on this one. But basically, his use of the word law and the primary way that we talk about using it in Galatians, and because it's been mistaught, is people take the word law, nomos in Greek, and assume they're talking about God's commandments. And the mistake with that is that Paul cannot be an apostle if he tells people to not keep the commandments of God. We call that the Deuteronomy 13 test. If you look at the first 5 verses of Deuteronomy 13, you get the idea that it doesn't matter who you are, it doesn't matter what great and wonderful things you do. It doesn't matter if you speak a word and the heavens open up. But if you teach people to disobey or distance themselves from God's commandments, you're nothing, and you're a nothing. And so Paul could not be an apostle. In fact, even Yeshua, that's Hebrew, Jesus in English, Yeshua could not be Messiah if he taught people to disobey God's commands, because the work of Messiah is to bring people to obeying the commandments of God. And we covered that in the last couple of weeks of study. So if you can pop on back to the previous ones and check those out if you haven't, if you don't recall that, or if you want to double check on that. So the use of the word law, nomos in the Greek text, in Paul's circumstance here, mostly talks about the law as in the works of the law, that being a particular phrase that particularly talks about the rules of the Pharisees, what you got to do to be a Pharisee, and all the extra added stuff they give you to do. And this is why Paul said we shouldn't be doing that, because we have purity and simplicity in obeying God's commandments. You don't need to muck up the works by adding a whole bunch of man-made religious things, or legalism, as Dr. Stern would put it. Um, we don't need that. You don't have to have that. You have everything you need as a Gentile to be in the family of God. You have the Spirit of God in you, and miracles occur around you. That is, that God is using you for miraculous things. And those are the things that should be proof to you that you belong to the family of God. And if you don't think you have the Spirit of God in you, and if you don't think you see miracles around you, pray and ask God to show you. That's exactly what's going on. So that's the second thing. The word law, uh, mostly in the letter to Galatians, is talking about the Pharisee rules, and not God's commands. So understand that. And the third one, okay, I'm blanking on. I do this. I've been doing this the whole study. I blank on what the third one. When we come to it, we'll talk about it. Okay. um, the third one is you don't need to be a Pharisee to belong to the family of God. I've already mentioned that, but that's the big reason for the letter. Because the Pharisees came along, Pharisees who were believers in Yeshua, but nonetheless were Pharisees, practicing Pharisees, came down from Jerusalem to the Galatian region and started telling the Gentiles, oh no, you can't be in the family of God. You're not Pharisees like us. You're not there yet. You're not acceptable yet to God. You have to become a Pharisee. So they tried this emotional argument by saying you're not really there yet unless you do this, this, and this. And if anybody comes along and tells you stuff like that, you need to flee. We do hold up the commandments of God as our lifestyle, and we do ask people to learn that. But all the extra added stuff is optional. We do a fairly traditional prayer service in Sabbath first thing. Okay, we don't require people to attend that. In fact, a sizable portion of the congregation shows up in time for lunch for some reason, but they're not as interested in the traditional. Okay, that's fine. And that's fine. We have a discussion on the weekly reading after lunch, and we have a Bible study of some sort. Not as much. Currently, my eyes are still giving me a lot of trouble, and I have a hard time preparing studies. And so I've basically just been pulling up and revising older things, because the amount of reading work and study and straining on screens and print is just pretty hard right now. So you'll notice on the screen that I'm using very large print these days because it helps me to see. The smaller print, everything is just too blurry right now. So on one hand, pray that I can get a good recovery on this. I am being seen by eye doctors, but the process isn't done yet. So just pray that finish up soon, because this has been very frustrating, and that everything will be very good when it's done. Okay, so the Pharisee process of making a conversion ends with a circumcision. Okay, let me explain. If you're a guy, okay, and you're a boy baby born into a Jewish family, into a Jewish community, you're going to be circumcised on the 8th day. That's the commandment. Orthodox tradition and Pharisee tradition of Paul's day was that once you've been accepted to the community, you've taken the classes, you've spent the money, you've proven to the community that you're worthy of making this conversion. The last things that you're going to do is, once you're accepted on that level, is that you're going to do tevilah, which is a baptism. You're going to go down as a Gentile. You're going to come up as a Jew, a new creation. This is where Paul gets this picture, by the way. You die as a Gentile. You're a new creation as a Jew, as part of the community of God. And so what's the commandment if you're a guy doing this? Is that within 8 days, you're to have a circumcision. That circumcision completes the process of the conversion to becoming a Pharisee. This is the circumcision Paul was arguing against. It wasn't God's commandment to circumcise, but this is the Pharisee tradition of making a circumcision on somebody who was a new convert. Paul's argument, and this is one of the things that God prizes very highly, is that you keep your word. So if you make the promise that you're going to become a Pharisee and you go through the process to the point where you get this circumcision done and you complete the process with that, then you've given your word. You've made your promise that you will obey all the rules of being a Pharisee, which has a lot of extra added stuff that's got nothing to do with walking with God. So Paul's argument for the Gentiles who are believers, don't bother with that. You don't need it. You already have everything you need to be family with, part of the family of God. Okay. And he ended chapter 3 with that statement. He ended chapter 4 with that statement. And so it's, you have no need to make any kind of conversion other than what's already happened in your soul when the Spirit of God entered you. So you don't need to be a Pharisee. And that was the big warning in the letter. Okay, now let's go and pick up on chapter 6. We're just going to do the first 5 verses this time, but let's go ahead and get started on this. Paul is winding down his letter here, so he's making a few last statements and pleas for people to pay attention and to get serious. And one of the things is in the context of somebody who may have been considering making a conversion to Pharisaism or even into modern Orthodox, is the people who try to make that conversion get really legalistic, what we call super Jews. They want to do everything to the absolute nth degree, and it doesn't work. It doesn't stick. It doesn't, and you just end up frustrating yourself. Anyways, so Paul is kind of broadening the statement a little bit, but he's still kind of focused on Pharisaism, or trying to convert to Pharisaism. In verse 6, he starts with, "Brethren, if a man is overtaken in any trespass, you who are spiritual, restore such a one in a spirit of gentleness, considering oneself, lest you also, oops, I just went the wrong spot, lest you also be tempted. Bear one another's burdens, and so fulfill the law of Christ. For if anyone thinks himself to be something when he is nothing, he deceives himself. But let each one examine his own work, and then he will have rejoicing in himself alone, and not in another. For each one shall bear his own load." Okay, that's our text for the day. And let me move over to our handout. Where'd it go? There it is. Okay. This, by the way, should be uploaded to the website or the Facebook page, so you can download your own copy of this if you want to look at it. And we've done that with every study in the book of Galatians. So what I get to do is, I've gone through this I think a couple times before already. And so each time I go through and I do a little updating and reading something and realizing, that made no sense at all, or, why did I ever say that? So it gets a little better each time. And this time, since I'm not doing a physical handout, I always try to limit my handouts to a front and back single page. It's easier to work with that way. However, in this, I don't have that restriction. So these are 3 and 4 pages each. So I like to stretch things out and add a little bit more detail than what was before. So here we go. All right. Our text here is, "Therefore, my beloved brethren, be steadfast, immovable always, abounding in the work of the Lord, knowing that your labor is not in vain in the Lord. 1 Corinthians 15, verse 58. Okay, that's Paul beginning to close down another letter to a different group of people. A lot of the similar arguments, though. Okay, the similar kind of idea. Love one, show your love one for another by putting up with one another and not being short-tempered with each other, or quick to condemn, or quick to look down on somebody because they're not as far along as you are. Okay, you know that. Okay, verse 1. Brethren, if a man is overtaken in any trespass, you who are spiritual, restore such a one in a spirit of gentleness, considering yourself, lest you also be tempted. Okay, that's New King James, by the way. This is an Englishman's Greek New Testament. I think this is a little more word for word. You can tell by the syntax. And I kind of like it because my Greek is terrible, and this helps me to understand it a little better. It says, brethren, if even be taken a man in some offense, you, the spiritual, restore such a man in a spirit of meekness, considering yourself, lest also you be tempted. Okay, so the syntax is a little different. Some word choices are a little different, but it sometimes helps catch the meaning a little better. So that's why I like using it. Okay, so you who are overtaken. Again, my Greek is terrible, but something like prolethi. Okay. The Greek equivalent of the Hebrew lekach, lifnei, to be taken, lifnei, before somebody or in front of somebody. Okay. Literally to the face. To face. Okay. To take before, or to face. Okay, so those of you who are facing some error or sin, okay. And my best guess at the understanding this would be using the words previously embroiled. Okay, it's kind of a big word, embroiled. No, I'm not talking about cooking your steaks. I'm previously embroiled. If you're caught up in something, if you are overtaken by something. Sins are usually a matter of weakness. You're caught up with the desire for something that's not right. And so those of us who are spiritual, or I should say those of you who are spiritual, that's how Paul writes it, those of you who are spiritual, need to work towards restoring somebody who is caught up in a particular sin. Okay? Not to look down on them or to think ill of them, but to restore them as somebody of value. Now, in the context of our letter here, that would be somebody who is caught up in the legalism of Pharisaism, thinking that they are improving themselves and making themselves better than others just to become part of the congregation of God. But if somebody's caught up in something like that, you who are more spiritual, walk them through the right way to a correction, to understanding things, okay? Things in a proper manner, and living things in a proper manner, okay? I'm not saying disobey God's commandments, but I am saying there is a right attitude, and there could be a wrong attitude for why and how we keep the commandments of God. We should walk in God's ways. It's a sign of our relationship with God, and it's our testimony to the world that God is real and God needs to be taken seriously. So we should. Okay. However, we needn't the overbearing hyperventilation of Pharisaism or modern Orthodox that have so much extra added stuff in the way of rules and lifestyle that it gets in the way and actually interferes with obeying God's commands. So okay. Let's move on. If you're caught in a trespass, paraptoma. This is kind of fuzzy. Okay, that stuff. To fall beside or near something. Okay, and I added the comment like a moth drawn to a flame. Someone who is caught in a trespass usually feel weak and helpless when it comes to resisting that trespass, that sin. And so we need to come alongside and to show a better way and to help help them walk into a better way and to turn around from the wrong way. Okay, and do that in a spirit of gentleness. Okay, prautus, forget that. I give up trying. Meaning gentleness, mildness, meekness, moderate or considerate. Okay, this is a fruit of the Spirit from last chapter. In gentleness. Okay, also Yaakov, James, chapter 3, verses 13 to 18. Okay, so in other words, we should not be thinking ourselves greater than someone we are trying to help redirect. Rather, we should be, circumspect, knowing that we're not perfect and we're not capable of doing everything perfectly. So we need to be kind to one another about that. Okay. Okay. Commentary here. It looks like Dr. Stern. This follows on 526 without a break in the thought. Okay. Let us not become conceited, provoking one another and envying one another. Don't be conceited to think you are better than the person you are correcting. Okay. We should have kind of an idea. Someone had an interesting philosophical point, is we should be acting more like one blind beggar showing another blind beggar where to find food. Talking about learning God's ways and learning our relationship with God. We shouldn't be coming across as the know-it-alls and we have it all together, but rather we should be a little more circumspect, a little more patient with one another. Okay. One should reproach one another in truth, in meekness and compassionate love for one's fellow man. No one should speak to his brother in anger or muttering or with a hard neck or with passionate spirit of wickedness, and he should not detest him in the phrase detest him in the foreskin. It's a funny set of words. Detest him in who he is, in his heart, but instead reproach him that day so as to not incur a sin because of him. This is a comment out of the Dead Sea Scrolls, which is why the phrase not detest him in his nature. Okay. It's a funny choice of words, and I think I decided to keep it in that way just because that's the actual quote. But not to hate somebody. The purpose of the there's one of two ways of looking at this, is looking at somebody who has not had a circumcision, meaning that they're a Gentile, so don't detest them because they're a Gentile. Or another way of looking at it is when a baby boy is circumcised, they enter the covenant. It's a promise made by the community to raise this child in the covenant, and the child's supposed to learn how to walk in the covenant. However, if they are not perfect at that, you're not supposed to detest somebody because they have been promised to walk in God's ways, and by their bar mitzvah, they should be old enough to have made a conscious choice to walk in God's ways. Don't detest them if they are not perfect. Okay, and that's kind of the way we should be looking at it. Okay, a variety of ancient sources, including Greek and Jewish wisdom, traditions, and the Dead Sea Scrolls, stressed wise and patient reproof for the person's good, for other person's good, and often stressed examining oneself before correcting others. Judaizers of considered humility. Judaism considered humility. Boy, I'm reading that wrong. Judaism considered humility one of the greatest virtues, even for the most noble. Okay, and we see that within traditional Jewish writing. We see that even in modern culture today, that somebody who can be very great of stature or accomplishment can still be a very humble person. And that's always, our society considers that quite a virtue. We think somebody who has great accomplishment or great talent, if they constantly remind people of that great accomplishment or talent, tend to get a little bit boring and annoying to those of us who really know how to do things. But the idea is it's still a good ethic. Let me double check something here real quick. Okay. Shalom Yef, almost the wrong person there. Shalom Ruhama, how you doing? Okay, no questions. We'll move on. Verse 2. Bear one another's burdens and so fulfill the law of Christ. Here's another application of the word law that I failed to take consideration of earlier on. I'm correcting my mistake now. Okay, one another's burdens bear you, and thus fulfill the law of the Christ. Englishman's Greek New Testament version there. Okay, burdens, bari, meaning heaviness, weight, burden, or trouble. Bearing the burden also means bearing the responsibility of returning people to the proper path. Okay, so bearing one another's burden. The same words used, same ideas used in the Torah, talking about the work or the load that the priests had to do. However, it's not a great translation, where the translation is the priest will bear the iniquity of the people. That's really not a good translation. It's better to say that the priest is going to bear the work of serving by providing the sacrifices, conducting the sacrifices for the people, and thus bear the workload of doing that. And that's really, workload is probably a better translation than burden. Although in physical labor, of course, burden is a load to carry, but in modern English, we don't. I don't think we attribute it as much to a physical labor. And it's certainly not to be translated as iniquity or sin, the way King's English translated that word in Hebrew back in the Torah. So, and so our burden to bear with one another is to bear the responsibility, to carry the responsibility of restoring somebody with the proper path, with the proper attitude on our behalf. Okay, Vayikra, Leviticus 19:17. You shall not hate your brother in your heart. You shall surely rebuke your neighbor and not bear sin because of him. Okay, we're supposed to, modern times, we're supposed to live and let live. Apparently, our job is to declare that which is right. Now, is it our job to force our neighbor to change their ways? No, but it is our job to show our neighbor that there is a right way to live. Okay. What is the law of Christ? Okay. Yochanan, John, 13:34 to 35, based on Vayikra Leviticus 19:18. Okay. So first is Yochanan, we'll cite here. A new commandment I give to you, that you love one another, as I have loved you. That you also love one another. By this, all will know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another. So, this is our our calling. This is what Yeshua calls us to do. Yeshua, again, is Hebrew. Jesus is the English. Mashiach is Hebrew. Christ is English. They both mean the same thing, anointed one. And Yeshua means salvation. And so Jesus is the anglicized version of the Greek version of Yeshua. Long explanation, that's the short answer. Okay? But it's the same name. Okay. So we show that we are the disciples of Messiah if we love one another. And in the context of Galatians here, that means taking the time and effort to correct one another, but in a loving and gentle fashion. Okay? You would want treat somebody as you would want someone to treat you if they're correcting you for something you are doing. That's wrong. Okay. This is possibly a slap at the Prushim, the Pharisees, applying their tradition as if they were God's law. In other words, the whole idea of returning someone to the clean and unfettered practice of God's commandments without so many layers of tradition interfering with it. It could be that this is possibly a slap at the Pharisees, and them being the ones caught in that sin, the sin of religiousness or legalism. Okay. The verse 2, the Torah's true meaning, which the Messiah upholds. I'm not even going to try to pronounce that. Meaning the law of the Messiah, a phrase found only once in the New Testament. So this is, it's kind of hard to find other citations of this phrase in the Brit Chadashah, that's New Testament, or New Covenant. It's hard to find similar phrases because this is the only time this particular phrase shows up this way. Law of Messiah. So we have to figure out what law of Messiah means. Okay. But the phrase appears in the Midrash Rabbah on Ecclesiastes 11:8. This is rabbinic literature then. The Torah, which a person learns in this world, is vanity in comparison with the Torah of the Messiah. Okay. That's kind of a vaunted position to put the Torah of Messiah. I'm not exactly sure. The law of Christ, the law of Messiah, would tell us to think less of the commandments of God, but I think it was one of those rabbinic expansion on an idea, trying to say it in a more grandiose fashion, that the rules of Messiah will make the commandments of God in the Torah pale by comparison. I have a hard time agreeing with that point of view, since our proof of our relationship with Messiah is in our willingness and our capability of obeying the commandments of God that are already given to us in the Bible. But nonetheless, this is an idea. Okay. some idea of what the law of Messiah is talking about, the Torah of Messiah. Okay, now Torah means instruction. It doesn't mean law. However, it's become a very popular translation since the doing of the Septuagint prior to Messiah's time. Since then, it seems to be very popular to translate Torah as law, even though it's not a very accurate translation. Instruction is more accurate. Okay, here the question is whether Yeshua instituted new Torah different from the Torah given at Mount Sinai. In other words, in fulfilling the law of the Messiah, is fulfilling the law of Messiah different from fulfilling the law of Moshe? I express my negative answer in my interpretive rendering, sorry for the tough reading, which by its wording includes the common, but in my opinion, mistaken traditional Christian view that Jesus abrogated excuse me. Sorry, we don't have a cut meter on the stop button on the microphone. And Jesus abrogated the supposedly legalistic Torah of Moshe and inaugurated in its place the law of love. Okay, that's not what's meant and what's said by the law of Messiah. Okay, this traditional view comes, this Christian traditional, in this case, not Jewish traditional. The eternity or non-abrogability, I had to look at that several times, abrogability of the Torah. Each morning, Orthodox Jews repeat in their prayers the Yigdal hymn, which affirms that God gave the Torah of truth to His people through His prophets, who was faithful through His prophet, who was faithful in His house. God will not alter His eternal law or exchange it for another. Okay, and we can see that Yeshua said that same thing. In fact, I cited it right here, so I'll just read it because it explains itself better than anything else. Yeshua himself reassured his hearers that he had not come to abolish the Torah, such as found in Matthew 5:17, which says, "Do not think I came to destroy the law or the prophets. I did not come to destroy, but to fulfill." And had a nice discussion with somebody recently on this, and I thought this was a good point, because they were understanding this and still in looking for good clarification. And the difficulty we have when we deal with Christians who look at this verse is they fixate totally on the last word, fulfill. And then they try to translate the word fulfill to mean something to the effect that fulfill means to end or to terminate or to get rid of. Fulfill, just kind of like if you send in a coupon for a free widget, the widget would eventually come in a box from a fulfillment center. Okay, once that coupon has been fulfilled with the delivery of that widget, it's all over. It's done. All the duties and responsibilities of the company who is offering that coupon are fulfilled. They're done. And that's the picture that's often used. The problem with that is it doesn't matter how you translate fulfill if the phrase starts off with, "Do not think that I came to destroy the law or the prophets." I did not come to destroy. Okay, so he says it twice here in this phrase. He did not come to destroy. So any version of fulfill, any interpretation of fulfill, which takes away lessons or removes the commandments of God, is opposite of what Yeshua is strenuously saying, and he repeats himself 2 more times with this point. Okay, heaven and earth will pass away, but not one jot or tittle of the commandments will pass away. If you do and teach others to keep the commandments, then you'll be great in the kingdom of heaven. If you don't, you won't. I don't know how you can justify translating fulfill in any way that lessens or reduces or gets rid of the commandments of God. This is exactly what Yeshua said. He came not to destroy the law and the prophets. That's part A of the statement. Part B cannot contradict part A and be logical. Okay. Take a look at verse 3. For if anyone thinks himself to be something when he is nothing, he deceives himself. Okay. For if thinks anyone to be something, nothing being, himself he deceives. Okay. Greek syntax, gotta love it. This statement needs to read as a supplement to the prior verse. How can you love one another if you are busy promoting yourself over one another? Okay, we run into this all the time. You have to be careful with people who come in and try to impress you with how much they know, or how accomplished they are. Or people that tend to this kind of a thing. You have to be careful with people that do that. So, and it happens, and just be aware of that. How can you love one another when you're so busy trying to promote yourself above others? Okay, we're supposed to consider each other's honor greater than our own. Can't do that if you're busy promoting yourself. Okay. Perhaps referring again to the Prushim, the Pharisees, Matityahu in Matthew 23, verses 1 to 12. Woe unto you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites. That's the bit. If a man seems to think he is religious because of his detailed observance of mitzvot, that is commandments, rabbinic or Pharisaic commandments, rules, I should say, not commandments, rules, or that of man's self-made religious principles, such as what the Gentiles uphold, then he is not following the law of Moses, which means his soul is deceived. Very important. So people that are too full of themselves, they deceive themselves, because frankly we're all sinners, and we all we all need help, and we all need to make a return, a more heartfelt and more thorough return to God. Okay. Again, questions, comments, rebukes, stick them in the comments. Okay, good. Shalom, Seth. Let's see. Do you feel that it is true for people who think they have a specific calling? Shalom, by the way. Shalom, Seth. Which is true. People thinking themselves more superior. Sadly, people have been taught to think that way. That if you have your calling, then you've got it together and you're happening, and that poor loser who doesn't have their calling settled yet, just don't have it like I've got it together kind of thing. Yeah, that can happen. We have to be careful of thinking ourselves more highly than we should. It doesn't mean you shouldn't have confidence in God or confidence in what you know that God does through you. But it does mean that you shouldn't think yourself more highly than others because of that. Yeah, we do need a certain amount of confidence in walking in God's kingdom. If God has given you the ability, or should say, had given you the circumstances of praying over people and watching God heal them to the point where you have this gift of healing. Although the one who gets healed actually has the gift, you're the messenger. Okay, now does that mean that you can walk around bragging to everybody that you have the gift of healing? No. Do you look down on people because they don't have a gift of healing like you've got a gift of healing? No. But you should have the confidence in knowing that God works through you in a specific area and that you can step out in boldness, expecting God to continue to use you in that area. Just don't do it in a prideful, self-centered, self-aggrandizing manner. Okay. Hope I got that right. If not, let me know. Okay, verse 4. But let each one examine his own work, and then he will have rejoicing in himself alone, and not in another. Okay. But the work of himself let prove each, and then as to himself alone, the boasting will have, and not to another. Not to another. It's an interesting difference there. Okay, that's English from Greek New Testament. Okay, each one examine his own work in order to confine his boasting to his individual status. Okay, that's another attempt at translating that. I put my own 2 cents in this one. Each of you review your own actions, then you can rejoice in your own progress, and not act as a judge of anyone else. Okay, I might need to reword that a little bit better, because we're supposed to rejoice in our progress and our growth and in the capabilities that God has given us. But that's actually more for us to enjoy on our own between us and God. It shouldn't be for us to wear that capability on everybody else's noses, or that relationship, or the gifts that God works through you. Other than, it's important that we all know each other's gifts, so that if there's someone among us who has a gift in healing and someone is sick, then definitely we need to, employ that person, go and find them and ask them to pray over you, or, a gift of faith or a gift of wisdom, talk to them and soak up the wisdom that they give you. But we shouldn't be boasting in ourselves that we have. We should not be boasting of ourselves. Let's put it that way. In ourselves, we should be pleased that God is using us. We should be happy that God is using us. We should be, overjoyed that God is using us. And He's using us in enough of a way that we expect God to use us frequently in that manner. Okay, that's knowing your gift. But it's not for us to wear it on everybody else's noses, or to declare that my gift is superior to yours. Okay. Okay, so that's my attempt at translating that line. Okay. Paul's point derives from the fact that the self-aggrandizement is at the expense of others. Okay. Pretty much a plain statement there. Okay. Oh, good. Thank you. Okay, verse 5. For each one shall bear his own load. Okay. For each one his own load shall bear. Okay, different syntax, basically the same idea. Load, which means a burden or load, similar to the bearing of iniquity in Shemot Exodus 28:28 in the King James, in the authorized King's English. Okay, it says, so we're not bearing they're not bearing their iniquity. They haven't sinned or done something wrong or erroneous. Is that something on my screen? I guess not. Okay. I must have typed that wrong. I need to go fix that. Okay. Not the same as in verse 2. Here, a different word means we have our own work, that is repentance, to do. Romans 14:14. Who are you to judge another's servant? To his own master he stands or falls. Indeed, he will be made to stand, for God is able to make him stand. Also, see 1 Corinthians 12. That's the gifts of the Spirit, for an idea of his having our own duties and activities. Okay. 1 Corinthians 12, I would like to point out that Paul repeated this and thus wants to make sure we understand that God gives us gifts for the benefit of the congregation, for the good of everybody around us, not for our pride and our own popularity or our own renown, our own famousness, but for the congregation to benefit. Okay, so we need to be sure that we understand that. Okay. So each will bear his own load. This is the same word as in burden as in Shemot, in Exodus, or iniquity. I put it in there because it just strikes me so strange a choice of translation. It simply means a burden to carry, a load to carry. Okay. All right. All right, then last paragraph here, commentary. As explained in verses 3 and 4, each person will have to carry his own load of guilt if he has failed to do the work which the Messiah has given him to do. Okay, so Dr. Stern focuses on this load of guilt, and if we fail to do so, there is no conflict with the exhortations of verse 2 to bear one another's burdens. There a different Greek word is used in urging the Galatians to act lovingly toward fellow believers burdened by griefs, worries, and illnesses. Okay, there he doesn't mention sins, but that's okay. Bear one another's burdens. In other words, help each other with what people are going through, whether it's it could be just a physical, medical thing that you bear one another's burden. Could be a sin that we're helping somebody to overcome, walking it through with them, praying over them, praying with them. The whole 9 yards, basically. Okay, so our role is to help one another. Now, in the context of our letter to Galatians and the topic of Pharisaism, we're to try to restore somebody who mistakenly embraced Pharisaism, thinking it's going to improve them, when now that they know that it won't. Same thing with modern Orthodox. You're to receive them back as a brother, not to harangue them over their legalistic observances of man-made rules and regulations, but rather to help walk them back to a proper understanding of God's commandments, and that it's God's word that matters. Our words are, our instructions may be helpful, but they're not at the same level. Okay, so that's how I would look at that in context with, because the whole letter's about Pharisaism. Okay, that's it for our study. Any questions, comments, rebukes? I'll leave this on for a little bit longer. I know there's a delay between the time I talk and the time you hear it. And so hopefully you'll catch up on this pretty quick. In the meantime, I'll do my little ending blurb, and then I'll go quiet for a couple minutes just to make sure that we have enough time for the study to come out on your end, and I won't chop it off on the recording. Okay, so this is Simchat Yeshua Messianic Fellowship. Again, we're here every Wednesday at 6 o'clock California time to, right now we're in Galatians chapter 6. We're going to be finishing up Galatians in a couple, 3 weeks. And we'll be wanting to think of a topic or a book to study, any topic. If you're going to do some topics, if you want to do another book like Ephesians or others, we can do that. Excuse me. And then we can continue on. So, okay. Yeah. YouTube stuff. Okay. Like, share, subscribe, ring the bell. If you like what you hear, you can go online, and there's a way to donate and support the channel and the congregation through the website. We also have a Facebook page. Wow. I think I've already checked out with my brain. The website is simchatyeshua.org. That's spelled SIMCHATYESHUA. The Facebook page is Simchat Yeshua. Both are all one word. And you can see us there. You can leave your comments and suggestions, questions, comments, rebukes, whatever you'd like. And be happy to take them. Okay. We'll see you. Don't forget, tomorrow sundown, begins Hanukkah. Yay! Don't forget to light your candles and spin your dreidels. And we'll certainly pick up. Pick up next week. So we'll be in sort of our last day of Hanukkah, or close to the last day of Hanukkah next week. But we'll see you then. We'll see you Shabbat at the shul. We are going to have a Hanukkah celebration, but because our kitchen is down over there, it's going to be hard to do proper stuff. So we're going to end up at Gloria's for a Hanukkah celebration at 6 o'clock this coming Saturday. And you can, I think you guys have all been there. Most of you have all been there. So we'll pick up at Gloria's we'll go to shul like our normal congregation meeting, and then we'll come at 5 o'clock or so, we'll start heading over to Gloria's place, and we'll have our Hanukkah celebration there. Okay. That'll do it for now. I'm going to go quiet for a bit before I shut it off, just to make sure that the last of what I'm saying comes out the other side. and because of the delay. So God bless you, shalom, and we'll see you Shabbat and or next Wednesday, God willing. Shalom. I'm sorry, Barbara, I missed. You said Psalms 119. Um, Context on that? I mean, otherwise it's a great psalm, but I mean, um, but following God's commandments, definitely, definitely so.